Imagine this. Your daughter's best friend, the one she trusted with every secret, turns out to be her biggest enemy. I stayed silent at first, but when I uncovered the truth, my silence turned into revenge they never saw coming. They say you can never really know who your true friends are until life tests them. For the longest time, I believed my daughter Emily had the kind of best friend every parent prays for. Her name was Jessica, smart, polite, always smiling, and practically living at our house. From sleepovers in middle school to study sessions in high school, Jessica was more than just Emily's friend. She was like family. I can't even count how many times I saw them giggling in Emily's room, sharing secrets, or helping each other with homework late into the night. As a father, I felt relieved. In today's world, where teenagers often get caught up in dangerous distractions, having a friend like Jessica felt like a blessing. She kept Emily grounded, focused, and happy. Or at least, that's what I thought. Emily was a bright girl, on a roll, passionate about music, and already receiving interest from colleges. She worked hard, but she also had a gentle, trusting heart. Too trusting, perhaps. She believed in loyalty, honesty, and kindness. And she believed Jessica stood for all those things too. But little did we know, Jessica was hiding a side of herself we could never have imagined. The first crack in their perfect friendship appeared during junior year. Emily had just started dating a boy named Ryan. He was captain of the debate team, well-spoken, and charming in a way that made every girl at school notice. When he asked Emily out, she was over the moon. Jessica, at first, seemed supportive. She teased Emily about her new love, and even helped her pick outfits for their dates. But behind that cheerful facade, I sensed something. A flicker of envy in her eyes. A pause too long when Ryan's name came up. I ignored it at the time. Maybe I shouldn't have, because soon things started changing. Emily began coming home upset more often. She'd lock herself in her room, tears in her eyes, muttering that people at school are saying things about her and Ryan that weren't true. When I asked her who was spreading these rumors, she wouldn't say. She wanted to protect Jessica, even then. But a father's instincts never lie. And mine were screaming at me that the very girl Emily trusted most was the one pulling the strings. Emily's life had always been an open book to Jessica. Every fight, every crush, every insecurity, Jessica knew it all. That's the dangerous thing about letting someone so close. When they decide to hurt you, they know exactly where to strike. The first real blow came after homecoming. Emily and Ryan had gone together, looking like the perfect couple. I still remember Emily coming home that night, glowing with happiness, her phone buzzing with pictures from friends. She danced, she laughed, she looked free. But just 2 days later, whispers started circling around school. Someone had leaked photos of Emily. Nothing scandalous, just innocent pictures of her in Ryan's jacket, laughing under the gym lights. But the captions twisted everything. Emily throwing herself at Ryan. Desperate much. Poor Ryan, stuck with her clinginess. High school kids can be cruel. With every repost, every mocking comment, Emily's confidence shattered. She came home crying, begging me not to tell her mom what was going on. I held her that night, promising everything would be okay. But inside, I was boiling. Who would do this to her? And then, slowly, the puzzle started fitting together. One of the screenshots Emily received had the original sender's name blurred out, but not enough. I enlarged it on my laptop, adjusted the brightness, and there it was, a tiny glimpse of the name. Jessica. I wanted to scream. The girl who ate dinner at our table, who called me Uncle David, was the same girl tearing my daughter apart from the inside. But betrayal has layers. Jessica wasn't satisfied with just ruining Emily's reputation. She wanted more. The next few weeks, Emily noticed Ryan pulling away. His texts grew shorter, his excuses longer. He was suddenly busy all the time. When Emily confronted him, he blurted out something that nearly broke her. "People told me you were cheating on me, Emily. I didn't want to believe it, but Jessica showed me proof." Proof? My daughter looked at him, stunned. She had never cheated, never even thought about it. And yet, Jessica had fabricated text messages, screenshots, and fake accounts, all designed to make Emily look like the villain. Ryan, young and foolish, believed them. That night, I heard my daughter sob through the walls. She kept repeating the same thing. Why would she do this? She's my best friend. I didn't have the heart to tell her then that I already knew why. Jealousy, envy, control. Jessica couldn't stand the fact that Emily had something or someone she didn't. But here's the thing about betrayal. It plants seeds of revenge. And while Emily cried herself to sleep, I sat in my study, staring at the evidence on my computer. Jessica thought she was clever. She thought she had erased her tracks. But she underestimated two things: a father's patience, a father's determination. Because from that night on, I decided I wasn't just going to protect Emily. I was going to destroy Jessica's little empire of lies, piece by piece. When I tell you I spent nights awake, I mean it literally. I sat at my desk while the house slept, the glow of my laptop painting the walls blue. I am not a detective by trade. I run a small landscaping business, but I know how to follow a thread, and I know how to wait until someone shows you the whole sweater of lies they've been knitting. First thing I did was what any careful person would. I stopped chasing wild hunches and started collecting proof. Rumors and hearsay are like smoke. They frighten people, but they don't build a case. I wanted fire I could hold in my hands. I wanted the kind of evidence that peeled off a mask and left a face underneath exposed for everyone to see. Step 1. Digital breadcrumbs. Jessica had been sloppy. She had left traces, comments posted from her phone, a handful of throwaway accounts with the same half-finished usernames, a cloud backup sync that didn't quite scrub metadata. I spent days cataloging screenshots, tracking IP hints, saving copies of posts and the timestamps. I learned how far a teenager will go to invent an alternate reality, and how much of that alternate reality exists on flimsy, recoverable digital paper. Step 2. Witnesses. Teenage cruelty rarely happens in a vacuum. Jessica had been feeding other kids little lies, teasing them into reposting and embellishing. I reached out, carefully, quietly, to a few parents I trusted from soccer practice and PDA. I asked questions without telling them why. It turned out a lot of kids had seen things they hadn't wanted to see. A group chat where Jessica orchestrated a narrative about Emily being obsessed. Another kid who remembered Jessica bragging about setting Emily straight. And one girl who admitted she felt awful after being pressured into sharing a doctored screenshot. Step 3. The subtle trap. If Jessica wanted the world to believe a story, she'd need proof in front of other people. So I created a situation where proof could only come from her mouth, and where her natural arrogance would do the rest for me. I started by planting small, innocuous tests. I had Emily update her privacy settings, change her wallpaper, and stop replying to certain accounts for a few days. I watched how the narrative shifted. Whenever Emily went quiet, Jessica would fill the silence with louder accusations. That showed me one thing. Jessica loved being the center of attention. She didn't just lie, she performed. Next, I used what she loved against her: attention and validation. I posted, anonymously through a couple of school groups, a throwaway question about how to help a friend who's being gaslit. It was a soft prod. Jessica took it as a chance to be the teacher. She gave advice, named examples, and even used phrases that matched the fake messages she made about Emily. Her words were the fingerprints I needed. But words, again, would not be enough. I needed a public stage where the truth couldn't be buried. I approached one of the teachers, Mrs. Alvarez, a no-nonsense English teacher who had always been fair to my daughter. I didn't tell her everything. I simply explained that there was a bullying problem spiraling out of control and offered to show her some collected materials. She listened, called the school counselor in, and agreed to look into it formally. That was a lever I needed. An institutional investigation. Meanwhile, I started a parallel plan to protect Emily emotionally. I insisted she stop confronting people at school. No more arguments. No more direct appeals. That was the hardest part. Asking your child to be patient while you quietly rebuild what had been torn down. But Emily agreed. She trusted me. Her trust was the armor. I needed to let the trap be set. Then came the moment Jessica made her mistake. She was arrogant, remember? Confident. Quick to brag in front of people she thought were her allies. At a small party thrown by one of the other parents, a casual backyard barbecue, Jessica began to puff up about how she handled Emily, how she had exposed her for everyone's good. Kids laughed. Adults drifted closer, curious. I wasn't there, but someone I quietly convinced to keep an ear out was. They recorded a portion of Jessica's monologue on their phone and sent it to me. In the recording, Jessica boasts about the account she created, the screenshot she'd faked, and how she made sure Ryan saw the receipts so he'd dump her. She used words that matched the doctor messages I'd already reconstructed, and she laughed with a casual cruelty that made my stomach turn. That clip changed everything. It turned speculation into confession. Once I had the voice memo, I staged the next move carefully. I compiled a binder. Yes, a binder, with printed copies of the fake screenshots, the metadata, the timestamps, comments from other students, and the voice memo. I labeled everything, dated it, and made 2 copies. One went to the school principal with a calm, factual letter. The other I saved for the day the school called a meeting. The school could have handled it quietly. They didn't. After looking over the documents, the principal decided to call a meeting with Jessica, her parents, Emily, Ryan, and us. I insisted on being present, though part of me wanted to watch from the doorway, like a quiet executioner. When the day came, the room smelled like coffee and nervous perfume. The counselor led the conversation. Papers were slid across the table. I stayed calm, almost boringly so, because I knew the image of measured composure would do as much damage to Jessica's fragile bravado as any shout. They started with questions: school policy, intent, whether anyone had been coerced. Then, as gently as anyone could manage, they presented the evidence. A teacher read from my binder. The voice memo played through the speaker, clear and absurd in its casualness. Jessica's face, which had always seemed so composed, flickered. The smile that used to be her shield cracked. She attempted to pretend it was a joke, that she'd been only exaggerating. But adults aren't quite as impressionable as kids. The principal asked for an explanation, and the room leaned forward in a kind of silence that feels like a physical thing. Jessica's parents, good people, or at least people who wanted the school to think so, tried to apologize on her behalf. They suggested a mediation, perhaps counseling. The school recommended a temporary suspension and mandatory restorative sessions. It was official. The mask had slipped and consequences were being set in motion. But here's an important thing you must understand about revenge. Exposing the liar is one thing. Teaching someone to understand the harm they did is another. I wanted more than a suspension. I wanted accountability that rebuilt what was broken, not a hollow, easily ignored punishment. So I made a second move. I spoke to Ryan separately and handed him a second binder, one laid out just for him. It included the forged screenshots next to the originals, side by side, and a note explaining how fake evidence can be engineered. I didn't aim to humiliate him. I aimed to restore an innocent boy's sense of right and wrong. He read it, pale and quiet, and then he did something I hadn't anticipated. He publicly apologized to Emily in front of friends the next week. It wasn't a theatrical apology. It was a small, honest thing. But to Emily, it meant the world. And to me, it meant that my plan was working exactly as I'd hoped. The lies that had been used to isolate my daughter were being unspooled piece by piece. Jessica's web was collapsing. Still, I knew the battle was far from over. Kids remember wrongs for a long time. Rumors have a way of lingering, like a smell you can't quite scrub away. The school's actions were necessary, but I also wanted the truth to live where it mattered most, in the community's memory, where the narrative had initially been stolen. So I did what I've been avoiding. I made the truth louder than the lies had been. I encouraged Emily to join the school's open mic night and perform a short piece she had written about trust and betrayal. It was brave, more brave than anything I had asked of her. She stood on stage, hands shaking, and read a poem that was not about anyone by name, but about the aching clarity of discovery and the slow, steady work of putting yourself back together. Kids who had once laughed sat with their faces unreadable. Some of them came up to Emily afterwards and said, "I'm sorry." Not all of them, but some. Enough. By the end of part 3, Jessica had been disciplined. Ryan had apologized. The group chats were quieter. The school had a record. The parents had paperwork. But the real victory wasn't in the suspension slip or the apology. It was in the reclamation of Emily's voice, her stepping back into daylight without flinching. Revenge, I had learned, isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's surgical. It's the quiet assembling of facts until the only thing left for the liar is the truth laid bare. And yet, even with the truth out, I knew Jessica still had friends, still had a life in the same hallways. The end game wasn't simply to punish. It was to reconstruct the world so Emily could breathe again without fear. That reconstruction would take time. There were still murmurs at lunch tables and 1 or 2 pockets of viciousness that had not yet melted. Part 4 would be where I pushed further, where consequences would reach beyond the classroom and into the places where a reputation, once stolen, often hides: colleges, social circles, and future opportunities. But for the first time since the photos were leaked, Emily slept without waking me in the night. She smiled at breakfast. She practiced guitar again. Small things, but the sort of small things that mean the war is tipping in your favor. And if you're wondering whether I enjoyed any of this, seeing another human being flounder, the answer is no. I felt no pleasure. What I felt was relief, fierce and sharp, and the quiet satisfaction of a father who kept his promise to stand between his child and the cruelty of the world, and to make sure that when the dust settled, his daughter's name would still be hers. When the dust of that school meeting settled, it felt like a storm had passed. But storms always leave debris behind. Emily was stronger, yes, but high school isn't kind to anyone who's been at the center of scandal. Whispers lingered. Some kids still looked at her sideways, wondering if maybe the lies had been true. That's the poison of betrayal. Even after the truth is out, the doubt doesn't die so easily. Jessica had been suspended, forced into restorative sessions, and her parents were humiliated. On the surface, it looked like justice had been served. But I knew better. Kids like Jessica, manipulative, arrogant, convinced of their own brilliance, don't stop after one slap on the wrist. They adapt. They scheme again. And if you don't make the consequences real, they'll think they're untouchable. I wasn't about to let that happen. So I turned my attention to something bigger than school gossip. The future. Emily had her eyes on a few prestigious colleges. Her GPA was solid, her extracurriculars impressive, and her essays heartfelt. But recommendations and community reputation matter. If the rumors Jessica planted weren't uprooted completely, they could still shadow Emily's applications. And Jessica, clever as she was, also had ambitions. She had been bragging for years about her dream of getting into Stanford, talking about how her essays would blow everyone else out of the water. Here's where revenge takes patience. It's not just about striking back in the moment. It's about shaping what comes after. I compiled everything again, the screenshots, the fake accounts, the recorded confession. This time, I wasn't just thinking about a school principal. I was thinking about scholarship committees, admissions boards, future employers, institutions that value integrity above all. I made a digital dossier, neat and professional, with dates, explanations, and context. But I didn't send it anywhere yet. Timing mattered. Too early and it would seem petty. Too late and the damage might already be done. Meanwhile, Emily was healing. Slowly, I watched her come back to life. She played her guitar in the evenings again, singing softly when she thought no one was listening. She laughed at sitcoms with her mom. She even started helping me in the yard, joking about how landscaping is the best therapy. Those moments meant more to me than anything else. But healing isn't linear. There were nights she still broke down, whispering through tears, "Dad, why did she hate me so much? What did I ever do?" And every time I told her the same thing. Some people can't stand to see others shine, but your light isn't theirs to take. Still, I could see the question lingering in her eyes. Would the world ever see her as more than the rumors Jessica had created? That was the answer I was determined to secure for her. The opportunity came faster than I expected. The school organized its annual college prep seminar, inviting local universities and guidance counselors. Students were encouraged to bring their resumes, essays, and recommendations to get feedback. It was a big deal, the kind of event parents hovered at, quietly hoping their kids would impress someone important. Jessica showed up in her usual way, polished, smiling, acting like nothing had happened. I could tell she believed the suspension was already forgotten. In her mind, she was still the golden girl. But the truth has a funny way of clinging. Halfway through the seminar, one of the guidance counselors, a sharp woman named Ms. Turner, pulled me aside. She had seen my binder earlier in the semester when the school investigated. Now she whispered, "Mr. Miller, would you be comfortable if I used some of your documentation for our internal ethics workshop? We had more cases of digital harassment, and yours is thorough." I smiled. That was exactly what I've been waiting for. The story moving beyond rumor into record. If Jessica wanted to pretend it was all behind her, reality was about to remind her otherwise. By the end of the week, the workshop presentation circulated among teachers and staff. Jessica's actions, anonymized but still recognizable to anyone who knew the details, became a case study in manipulation and digital cruelty. Suddenly, she wasn't just a student who'd had a rough patch. She was a cautionary tale everyone whispered about. Word spread, as it always does. A friend of a friend mentioned it to someone on the debate team, who mentioned it to a parent, who mentioned it at the local coffee shop. By the time the college reps returned for follow-ups, Jessica's reputation wasn't polished anymore. It was stained. Ryan, meanwhile, had quietly started defending Emily in conversations. His guilt was eating him alive. He admitted to a few friends how he had believed lies without checking the facts. That confession traveled just as fast as the rumors once had. Only this time, it helped rebuild Emily's name. Jessica, though, began to feel the walls close in. She was still smart, still ambitious, but for the first time, her charm wasn't enough. Teachers were watchful. Parents warned their kids quietly. Be careful what you share with her. Even her closest allies started keeping their distance. And that was when I played my final card for part 4. I reached out discreetly, without Emily knowing, to a local nonprofit that worked with teenagers on online safety and digital responsibility. I shared Jessica's case file. They didn't ask for her name, but they asked if they could use the materials for training. I agreed. Weeks later, Emily came home with wide eyes and said, "Dad, you won't believe this. They're teaching about fake screenshots and cyberbullying in our advisory class." Jessica couldn't even look up the whole time. That moment wasn't just revenge. It was justice. Jessica's lies had been turned into a lesson, one that would follow her far longer than a school suspension ever could. But even then, I wasn't done, because Part 5 was where I ensured that when the time came for Emily to walk into her future, Jessica's shadow wouldn't be waiting there to follow. Revenge is often imagined as loud, slammed doors, shouted confessions, public humiliation. But in my experience, the most devastating revenge is quiet. It creeps in slowly, reshaping the way people see you. And by the time your enemy realizes what's happening, it's already too late. Jessica learned that the hard way. Months passed. Emily was healing. She joined her school's choir again, played guitar in the evenings, and even started volunteering at the library. Her confidence was coming back. Not overnight, but piece by piece, like a cracked mirror being fitted back together. But Jessica, she was unraveling. Her once perfect image had cracks everywhere. Teachers eyed her carefully. Parents whispered. Colleges, too, had started to take note. See, admissions boards don't just look at grades. They look at character, recommendations, discipline records. Jessica's suspension wasn't secret anymore. It was logged, official, stamped into her file. And when the time came to apply for those dream schools she bragged about for years, her applications hit a wall. Rumors reached me through PTA grapevines. Stanford rejected her. Princeton didn't even give her an interview. Even state schools hesitated. Meanwhile, Emily's story turned in the opposite direction. Her essays were raw and honest, inspired by the pain she'd endured. She wrote about resilience, about trust, about what it meant to rebuild yourself after betrayal. Her music teacher recommended her with glowing words. Her counselor, who had seen the entire ordeal, described her as a student who turned adversity into strength. When the acceptance letter started arriving, Emily cried. Not because she was scared, but because she finally felt seen again for who she was, not who Jessica had tried to paint her to be. I'll never forget the night she got her top choice acceptance. She ran into the living room, letter in hand, tears on her face, and whispered, "Dad, I did it." And I, the man who had spent months building binders and dossiers, setting traps and collecting receipts, felt something deeper than victory. I felt peace. But the world, funny enough, wasn't done delivering consequences to Jessica. One afternoon, I was at the grocery store when I overheard two parents talking near the deli counter. They were whispering about how Jessica had been denied a scholarship because someone uncovered an incident of dishonesty at school. They didn't know I was standing right there. They didn't know the man who had made sure every lie she told was documented, filed, and ready to haunt her when integrity mattered most. Jessica wasn't expelled. She wasn't dragged through the mud in public. Instead, she was left to live with the weight of her own actions. Doors quietly closing in her face, one after another. And that, I realized, was the sharpest revenge of all. See, people forget gossip. They forget rumors. But they don't forget patterns. Jessica had branded herself with her own cruelty, and no matter how hard she tried to scrub away, the world had taken note. As for Emily, she grew. She thrived. She turned her scars into art, her pain into music, her story into strength. And while she doesn't know all the details of what I did behind the scenes, she knows as much. Her father never stayed silent when it mattered. Sometimes, revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about making sure the person you love rises so high above the lies that no one can ever pull them down again. That night, as I sat alone in my study, I looked at the old binder, the one filled with screenshots, confessions, metadata. my arsenal, my proof. Slowly, I slid it into a drawer and locked it. The battle was over. And while Jessica's world was shrinking, Emily's was expanding. That was enough for me, because my silence had turned into fire, and that fire had burned away the lies, leaving only the truth.